March. So I have lots of head teacher colleagues and colleagues from council here on the call. So we have first up on the agenda, we have apologies for absence. Jamie.
I have received apologies from Catherine Forrester, Caroline Johnson, and Gareth Croxon.
Very much. So let's go to agenda item 2, declarations of interest. Couldn't see any obvious declarations, but obviously form will determine whether declared interest is significant nature and whether they need to withdraw for the meeting for the consideration of that issue is necessary. So if anything does come up and you think actually this is a method for me to do. So we have our meeting today is being recorded and hopefully streamed. I'm hoping that it's online, conducted in accordance to the council's remote meetings protocol and procedure. Indicate if you want to speak using the thumbs up or the raise hand function. Try to keep your microphones muted in between. It does avoid that horrible feedback loop. Of course, if you want to turn your cameras on, that's fine. But if the picture or sound breaks up, it'd be worth turning the camera off. We're all in the middle of a thunderstorm here in Bracknell, if you're with me. So it probably will break up, not only just because it's 4:30 in the afternoon. So when we do voting, we sometimes have to do a couple of loops. So we do that by general assent or by roll call. Sometimes we ask people to even put it into chat if we're finding it hard to see voting at that element. So it's wonderful to see so many colleagues here. And Paul didn't know I'm going to do this now, but it's nice to do it now at the beginning of the meeting than at the end of the meeting. So Paul Clark, you are going to be made a bit of a fuss of now. So Paul Clark, you are having your final schools forum today, and you are leaving after many years, and I'd like to signal with your hands using a polite gesture how many years you've been helping in education. Wow. So there's lots of claps already on the team on it, and I know people are going to be using those react buttons. So Paul, I was thinking about what to say, but public service is not always something that's thanked. And I think even as a head teacher, I probably get more thanks than you do in finance sometimes. Okay, so the element of working in finance for the good of children across the years is something that everybody wants to stop and pause and say thank you for, because when you're working behind the scenes on the numbers, it is hard sometimes to associate that with a child and a life. And I was thinking, actually, it does. How does the work you're doing impact children's lives? Every time we have made a sound financial decision that has changed a child's life, it is partly because of what you and your team has done. But it's time to celebrate you right now. So I'm just going to pass over to colleagues. Does anybody else want to celebrate Paul before we get on with the meeting? Now, Paul's shaking his head, but he's going to have to put up with it because he thought I was going to do this at the end. But I decided not to do it.
Can I just add on a personal note? I don't know how on earth we have managed to balance our budgets over the last few years without Paul's personal help. And I think I speak on behalf of the whole business team here at Garth. So thank you, Paul, over many years for all your help and advice. So much appreciated, and we're going to miss you hugely.
Grant.
I'll jump in, Paul. So I think, obviously more recently had less direct involvement with you, but all those years I was at Wildmoor Heath, and I used to come with my cap in hand to keep the school afloat. Like Keith, I just want to say thanks very much for all of that support. Your knowledge, always greatly valued, but actually more recently in Schools Forum, and I know that I can be a bit vocal, but you've always answered every question professionally with good grace, even when I'm going off on one. So I appreciate that as well. So thank you, Paul, and good luck in what you do next.
Trudy, you had your hand up next.
I did. Sorry, Liz, I'm not going to turn my video on because my connection is really bad. But Paul, thank you very much. You helped us both as a school, but also in my time in No Bursa and helping me sort all of that out. So, and your advice is always there. And as everyone else has said, it's always been really welcome. So thank you very much, and we'll miss you.
Roy, you put something in chat, which I think is lovely. Paul rocks. He's one of the nicest, most efficient people I've ever met. But what other words do you want to give to us?
Well, I mean, just that. I mean, I've been around forever. I mean, only recently as a councillor, but before that, I've been a governor in Bracknell forever. And Paul has been one of those people that has stood out, can do, constructive, thoughtful, generous. I can't praise him. I hope I'm not embarrassing you too much, Paul, but seriously, one of the nicest guys there is in Bracknell Forest Council. Thank you.
And Jenny said, Paul's knowledge and support over the years has been amazing. I still remember his finance training as new head teacher in Bracknell Forest many years ago. So, Paul, I know that's thoroughly embarrassed you, and you're not allowed to go rogue until the end of the meeting. We'll let you celebrate off camera because we're going to grill you on a few items today. I know you've got a few points, so we thought it'd be nicer to do the thanks before that. Jenny has just declared an interest in item 6 because it directly impacts and references Kendall Lane School. So thank you for declaring that. So we're going to go straight to the minutes and the matters arising. And there was on page 5 of the minutes, there was a proposal about the local authority. So Paul was going to take comments back to the local authority about the not applicable instead of 0. So, Paul, could you just give us a little bit more thoughts now we've embarrassed you?
Yeah, thanks for that. Can I just very quickly say thank you everyone for those comments. They're really lovely and touching and wonderful. Thank you very much. And yeah, I've really loved my time working with schools. That's the highlight of my job. My job does extend outside of education as well, but never surprised at how fantastic people are in schools, what jobs you're doing, and your finance stuff. A lot of time with your finance staff, they've been wonderful as well. So it's been really good to be part of this and to help you out and work together going forward on these matters as well. It's been really, really difficult for schools and it's getting more and more difficult financially as we go forward. So I don't underestimate the difficulties you're facing. But yeah, I've really enjoyed my time here. And yeah, it has been a long while. And I am looking forward to putting my feet up. And I have to say you're in very, very good hands going forward as well, because we've got Jordan covering the service going forward. So please be nice to him. He's really good and he'll be fantastic for you. So thank you very much for those. And yeah, I'm looking forward to ending at the end of May. So thank you very much. Sorry, got back to the business now. Yes, sorry, you did say something about the minutes. So yes, so last time there was just a question about in the council's budget proposals, it's a multiple year budget that we do, but it's not clear whether those multiple years are actually reflective of future years' pressures or savings, and then in the majority of cases they're not. But obviously when you come to an arena like this, it's much more there's where the more straightforward comments come from, and that's possibly than the other officer meetings. So yeah, we've taken that on board, and that's something that's being looked at by finance. But it's actually finding a way that does make that look still retain a clarity in those figures as they go forward. So we're just having to think about what we put in there, whether it's NA or a dash or something like that. But it's definitely something that's gone back to the Director of Finance, and he's interested in taking that forward. So hopefully we'll see some change on that in the next budget proposals from the council.
Very much. I don't think there was any other matters arising. So let's go back to. So I'm trying to navigate 2 screens. No, not a bit slicker than this. Okay, so and then we had an action under proposals for the school block and central services.
Again, that was about when we went to the last meeting. Obviously, we presented our figures of budget uplifts differently on a different format to what had been presented recently in the Institute of Fiscal Studies and by the DFE themselves. So the way we presented it had caused some confusion when you look at those national benchmarks, and it's just a local way that we do things slightly differently here. So to make that more meaningful comparison for education users and head teachers, so we did represent those and put out a couple of slides that hopefully show a closer like-for-like comparison with them what we were discussing at the last meeting, because our figure was much lower than those national figures. It's still lower than the Institute of Fiscal Studies, but it's the same as what the DFE are putting out as well. So it was just good to give you that better clarity. So hopefully that makes more sense to you now, and we'll make sure that we go forward on the same sort of basis.
Thank you. So we have agenda items 4, 5 and 6. 4 is around early years education. It's going to be presented by Cherry. 5 is from funding arrangements for pupils not attending school, and that's going to be presented by Dwayne. And then 6 is going to be from Paul and Dwayne. So let's hand over first off to Cherry.
Evening, everybody. Yes, this is really just an information item around the statutory guidance, the early education and childcare guidance that was recently published. It's really an update on the guidance that was already there following a High Court ruling in February around how some nurseries and some local authorities are implementing the entitlements. I think the key thing to say is the actual guidance is no different. However, they have clarified some of the points in it. So some of the things around artificial breaks. So parents should be able to access their entitlement without there being an artificial break. So that would mean something like a child who is accessing their 30 hours, which includes over the lunchtime period. What has been happening in some cases is people have been charging for that 30 minutes in the middle of the day. That isn't allowed. That's an artificial break if parents are having to pay for that lunchtime period as part of the uptake of their 30 hours. So it's things around that have been clarified. There's also changes around consumables. You can still charge for consumables. However, they can't be mandatory charges. You have to offer parents an alternative. So snacks, as an example, you can charge for snacks, but parents have to know what you're charging, but they also have to be able to opt out of those charges and bring their own snack. So all of those things have been there, but it has just clarified it more in light of the High Court ruling. If anybody would like to read the 70-something pages, it's a thrilling read, but it really does clarify that. And I think from a local authority's point of view, when a concern is raised, so a concern was raised by a parent around a day nursery and the top-up fees that they were charging, the Ombudsman found in favour of the parent, and it's then the local authority who are liable for paying that parent back, not the day nursery. So the council then took it to the High Court, but the High Court upheld it. So it's really around clarifying that. The big change that has come is around invoicing and helping parents understand the charges that there will be. So providers will be expected to publish their charges on their website. If they don't have a website, then it can be published on the Family Information Service website, and there is a template that will be available to do that. Most of the, what they're saying is that the guidance that they're given is effective from the 1st of April. However, the invoicing and the charges won't be statutory until January to give providers the time and opportunity to put those things in place. Following on from some DFE webinars, I think there was somewhere over 450 local authority attendees to the webinar the week before last. A frequently asked questions about charging document has been issued, and we've sent that out to all of our providers. And one of the things that they've acknowledged in that is around the food. It's been one of the biggest concerns from providers, especially full daycare, saying how can we offer the opportunity for people to bring their own food, where we're going to store it. So there's been lots of questions. So they have put leniency around that being in place for September, not for April. So that gives a little bit more time. So we've also sort of looked at that as well around the charging and said, we'll use the summer term as a transitional phase to support providers to get everything in place. And then it will be sort of statutory and real statutory, and we were making sure people are compliant for the beginning of September. There are lots of providers already who are not going to have to make significant changes to what they do. They may have to make some changes to the invoicing and the publishing of the charges, but they do have until January to do that. And obviously, again, you know, we will support people to put that in place with templates and advice and guidance. We had planned on having our new provider agreement for September, but in light of these changes, we've had to rush that in to have it ready for April. We did a draft, and following some feedback on the draft, so the draft that was attached to these papers, we have tweaked it very slightly since then, but this has all been done at speed. We've had very little time to put this in place. So some of the changes that we've made are clarifying that the invoices and receipts mentioned in the agreement refer to those sent to parents, because that's just a clarification point. Added reducing charges as an option for fees in line with statutory guidance. Clarified that electronic signatures or email confirmation from parents are acceptable alternatives to signatures. And added a link to the webpage with the current hourly admin fee, because I know that was another concern from people. So it's only very small tweaks to the version that was sent to Schools Forum. And I've said it has all been done at significant pace so that we can be ready for April. I think that's probably about all I have to say about it. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions about the guidance.
Grant, over to you.
Thanks, Cherry. That was good. And appreciate it. I guess my question, and I know this, this is obviously being handed down from high. Just wondering what your sense is, whether this is going to be a good thing or a more challenging thing for our private providers. I'm sure that lots of things that are in this are already being done locally. I am aware, though, of a close to Crown Wood private provider basically closing down at the end of the academic year, and we are getting a flurry of phone calls of panicked parents worried about where their child's going. I'm very aware of the pressure on our private providers. Does this help or does it hinder?
Good question, Grant. And I'm sure Sue will have something to say in a minute. I think it is very different, dependent on the provider, dependent on the situation they're in. I think that the thing is with our private and voluntary providers, there's such a wide range, and no one size fits all. And I think that is one of the main concerns. I think one of the other things to say in this forum is that when we were on the call with the Department for Education, there were lots and lots of concerns from across the country around day nurseries. And in our experience, when you've got the large chain day nurseries, they tend to be the providers who are the least flexible and put in the most conditions for parents. And my feel is they are probably going to be impacted the most. The Department for Education were very clear that they've spoken to some of the big providers who are very happy with the changes. So we did ask if they would name those large providers because that's not what we're actually seeing on the ground. So yeah, I think it is challenging. I think sometimes what we probably need to do is look at business models a little bit more, and I've got a team that are excellent at doing that. They will, and I was having a conversation with Paul earlier on about some processes we've put in place previously with providers to support them to help with that sustainability. So we will work with people to look at that. We've worked with people that they rent from to sort of negotiate some better deals with their rental costs. So I think the whole early years sector is a challenge. I think one of the biggest challenges at the moment, not only for early years, but for every sector, but for early years in particular, is staff recruitment and retention. That is one of the biggest concerns. So yeah, sorry, not a straight answer really, Grant. And I think it's a watch this space really, and we will do whatever we can to support our providers.
Yeah, Sue, did you want to?
Thank you, Liz. Thanks, Cherry. I totally echo what Cherry said. I think as a private sector and the whole of early years, we did go into panic for sure when we initially read the guidance. But now Cherry and her team have kindly unpicked it for us. They're like using Cluster as an example. There aren't, apart from publishing on your website, it was in place, anyway. It's just being maybe that little bit more transparent to parents and making it very clear to them their choices. Again, I think recruitment and retention is a much bigger problem than the recent guidance. And I'm sure you'd agree with that, Cherry, as well. But yeah, you know, early years is a sector, you know, in crisis, and we need as much support as possible. But as always, Cherry and her team are incredible. They're always at the end of the phone when we need a rant or we need some, you know, support. So thank you, Cherry. You know the circumstance I've been through recently, and I categorically cannot thank your team enough. So thank you.
Thank you, Sue, for your kind words. It's what we're here for, and we do want to make it successful. I mean, we have, on a positive, without sharing too much at the moment, we do have the potential of 2 new provisions, hopefully setting up within the next 6 months. Well, I'm hoping by September. So we do have some new provision in the pipeline, and we're continuing to work with other providers to look at what else they can do. So it's challenging, but then life is for everybody at the moment, and I think we just need to try and make sure that we've got the best opportunities for our youngest children.
Thank you very much. So before we move on to item 5, I just wanted to echo what other people have said. In terms of communication, it was the speed of what your team managed to turn around after the High Court judgment was perfect for us. It was about a week, and yes, there was a lot of media interest in it, but in terms of helping us then to help parents, that is exactly what we need from local services to do. You translated quite complicated High Court ruling into what we then needed to do, and then turned it into the paper, and you collaborated with us on the way. So there was lots of chance to work. So well done, Keith. I think you're shaking away a fly rather than clapping in the air there. So well done, Jerry. Right, let's go on to Dwayne. You're going to talk to us about funding arrangement for pupils not attending school due to medical reasons.
Sorry, first one I got the mic on. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Last year, if colleagues remember, I brought a paper to Schools Forum around funding to follow the children when, 1, they've been permanently excluded, or 2, when they were medically unfit for school. We agreed, or the recommendation at the time was that we fund both. We were asked to go away and work out a funding proposal, and today I'm bringing that funding proposal back so that all colleagues are clear. In terms of the funding regulations, we didn't need to seek permission to charge for permanent exclusions. That was something we could do. However, for funding to follow the children and young people due to medical reasons, then it is with the agreement of Schools Forum that we implement that. So we have gone away, we've done some work, and we've looked at all the funding that comes with the children. And basically, if I can just sort of contextualise it before I start, over 55% of the children in our medical needs have been there for over a year, and we've had no contributions for those children. The money for those children have still remained in school, whether or not they've had any education from school. So the recommendation for Schools Forum today is to approve the funding formula that we have come up with to implement for 2025-2026 financial year. Whilst the funding regulations don't say that we can charge, if I can refer colleagues to Arranging Education for Children Who Cannot Attend School for Medical Reasons, Health Reasons 2023, it does outline that the local authorities and schools can contribute to this provision. If the Schools Forum agree to this, it will bring us just into line with the Royal Borough of Windsor, Maidenhead and West Berkshire's local authorities. So whilst we don't charge here, other authorities have been charging and recouping money for quite a while. I mean, we've looked at, do nothing in terms of the funding. And as I said at the start, over 55% of the learners have not received any funding or funding following them into the provision. irrespective of whether they've been able to access pupil premium or any of the element 3 monies. That has remained with the schools. So just for clarity, under Section 19 of the Education Act, if a child is medically unfit for school, then the local authority has to ensure arrangements are made for those pupils. At the moment, we have lots of our robots out in schools, and we won't be charging for that delivery. So if the first thing we will offer when a child is medically unfit to attend school is the use of our digital technology, our AV1 robots. What we are proposing is 80%. So if I can take you to 5.17 of the report in terms of the funding formula, and this will be prorated. So what we are recommending is that under the basic entitlement, if a child is accessing medical needs, then 80% of that basic entitlement is recouped. 50% of the element 2, which is your notional 6,000, will be recouped, and also we will prorata that down. In terms of the pupil premium, that money should follow the child, and therefore, if the child is within the medical needs provision, access to education, we will recoup 100% of that pupil premium, so that money is allocated to that child, and 100% of the element 3 that comes with the plans. And again, that will be prorated for the time the child or young person access the medical needs. So in summary, really, I'm looking for a sort of approval from the Schools Forum to implement this from the financial year, and that's 80%, as I said, of entitlement, 50% of the notional funding when pupils receive support in terms of access to education, to seek pro rata contribution of the health and care plan, depending on the time the child is at the medical needs, and 100% of the pupil premium, again prorated for the time the child or young person is either in hospital or is at access to education. So I'm happy to take any questions here.
I think there'll be some comments wanted to be made across the team. My question before we hear from other colleagues. So how long would this be? So if a child has sadly fallen into such dire needs that they are going to need to be medically looked after, I can't see the amount of time. So is it 15 days you're saying, provided? So if a school has then sorted out alternative provisions themselves for it, would the money still be taken away? Sure.
No, so if you were sorting out, if we issue with the robot, we wouldn't be charging, because the school would still be providing the education for that child. And when we set up the access to education, it was about our children still feeling part of their school community. So that's not a cost. We have to, as a local authority, pick children up for medical needs on the 15th cumulative day. Therefore, to be honest with you, Liz, if you are putting that provision in, then that's fine. We wouldn't charge you. The issue is if it falls into the local authority. So on the 15th day, then we have to start putting that in. And as I said to you, over 55% of the children, we've not recouped any money for those, and all their money has remained in their schools. So we are saying for the time they're there, so if they were with us for 2 weeks, then we would obviously prorata that money down for 10 days then, and recoup that.
Thank you for the clarity. Right, let's pass over. Grant, your hand was up first, and then we'll go to Keith.
Thanks. I've got sort of 2 points. First of all, I mean, I get the logic of what you're saying, and I realise that there are costs to the local authority of picking this up, and so part of me sort of feels that. I think the other part of me says, though, that the money that you are clawing back, I've already allocated. That's the whole point of the basic entitlement, is that I'm paying for the teacher, I'm paying for the resources, I'm paying for all of the things I've got in place. And actually that goes to the pupil premium funding, which goes towards teaching assistants, and it goes, the notional funding for SEN goes for all this structural stuff. So when you claw it back, it's not just a pot of money I've got free. That means I have to take it from another bit of my budget, and somebody else doesn't get something they need. And I think, you know, one thing I just ask you to consider that is that none of us here in our schools are sitting on a huge chunk of money that we've just got available that we can just hand over, which doesn't affect something else in our budget. I mean, that's the first thing. The second thing, Dwayne, and I recall the paper that you presented last time, and I made the point about prevention, and I was pleased to see a section in here about prevention, but it doesn't say anything. You know, it says that action needs to be taken to reduce non-attendance, particularly around mental health and ASD, and we said the same thing when you presented the paper. The action seems to be around training, as if somehow schools don't already think about ASD and social and mental health. We don't have ELSAs, we don't have nurture. And then I was really annoyed at the sort of suggestion that we're not already trying loads and loads and loads of things to support these children. This idea that a disincentive for school-based intervention. I think that when children stop going to school full stop, I genuinely believe that most of us have tried everything within our armoury, but where is the strategy? Where is the strategy for ASD support? Where is the funding for mental health support? Where is, because my view is that the robots may be great. Asking for us to give money, fine. I have some disquiet about it. I get it, but this is all about managing the back end of this, that children not being in school. Where is the strategy for supporting young people so that they don't get anxiety, or that they are managing their anxiety, or we're getting them back into school? I haven't seen anything. And if the response is simply more training for schools, well, I mean, there's only so much that we can do, and we actually need specialists, because I'm not a counsellor. I don't think Jenny or Liz or, you know, Tim or Keith are counsellors. Most of our staff aren't counsellors. We're not mental health specialists. We're all teachers. We need specialist support. Where is the strategy? Because put the money in early and we don't have to do all of this stuff. And I've seen nothing from the LA, Dwayne, and that's what disappoints me, in that we're doing all this, but where is stopping it in the first place? So that's just my 2 points. But I mean, look, I would like the young people that aren't in school to get the best possible support. So I'll go along with it, but I don't think you should underestimate the impact it will have on schools if you're clawing back money.
Can I come back? I mean, in terms of the mental health in schools team, we do have that, which is NHS funded grant. I know a few schools haven't signed up to it. They have written to me last week in terms, and that is a preventative model, so that we don't get into the situation where children are, you know, out of school for prolonged for anxiety or mental health needs. So I'm happy to ping that email out to all schools, and please, you know, that team will come into schools as well. Can I just be clear, colleagues, as well? The medical needs aren't just around anxiety or ASD. There are children in there that have life-limiting conditions. There are children in there that are undergoing chemotherapy and dialysis. So I don't want you to think that it's, you know, it is a provision just for mental health. There's a variety of reasons why children and young people access that provision. And, you know, as I said, it is sort of, and I understand where you're coming from your school's budget grant, but if a child is having that money allocated to them, the money should follow that child. And that is exactly what the guidance says in terms of medical provision. And lots of authorities, as I said, actually do this as well. So I will take an action grant to email around all schools, the mental health and school team, so that any access to that. They do come into schools and offer support. And I know it doesn't sit in my area, but we do have the emotional-based school avoidance team as well, which sits in my colleague's area, and I will ask for some signposting around that as well. Okay.
Grant, I'll let you respond, and then we'll come back over to Kay.
Thanks, Dwayne. And I Cranwood has the mental health support team working with us, and they are excellent. They have limited capacity. Where there are complicating factors such as autism, they don't always want to get involved. EBSA, really hard to access, not enough capacity. So yes, those things exist, but the number of people that we are talking about already out of school, and the number that we in school are probably trying to manage at the moment, there isn't enough capacity. So I don't disagree with what you're saying, and I absolutely applaud the mental health support team, and please do make sure more schools are doing it. But capacity is limited. It doesn't meet the needs of the children, and that's all I just want to say back to that.
Thank you. So over to you, Keith.
Yeah, thank you. My first point was the one that Grant made. We can't simply just remove the pressures on our budget because you've removed part of our revenue. So I am concerned about that. But more so, and this is perhaps seeking clarification from you, Dwayne, because you refer here to 12 weeks in this paper. My concern is whether there is a risk that some children might continue to receive this provision when it is not necessary, and continues to incur a cost to the school because the revenue has been taken away when actually they could start to be reintegrated back into their main school.
Yeah, I'll come back on that. So just so I can contextualize this for colleagues, last year there were over 59 children in access to education, and so that I'm absolutely clear, this is a provision for 5 to 16-year-olds. It doesn't extend past 16, the medical needs, okay? And under statutory. So in terms of the children last year, they were 59. This year now we're talking 26 or 29. So we are working to return children to school, Keith, as quick as we can. And as soon as they're able to, and their medical needs is sort of met. So, you know, I take on board what you're saying, and we certainly don't want to remove money from the school. But it seems right that if a child has been away from a school for a whole year or longer, in some cases, some of the children that I certainly have sort of looked at, some children had been in there for 2 or 3 years. And it just seems morally right that that money that should follow that child in terms of the teaching. And to be clear, some of the schools have not been actively involved in keeping that link. So this is why, you know, it is important that we work with the schools as well to make sure when that child is well enough and able to return back to school as quickly as possible.
Thank you very much. Richard, I'll hand over to you in a moment. Let me just read what Trudy said in the chat. So Trudy said, support what Grant has voiced, totally understand the need for funding to be redirected, but this does create further challenges with recruitment and strategic planning. Clearly the recommendation makes sense, but further reducing costs does impact on our offer.
So just to reiterate, and I'll say this again, if schools have the robots, we have got about, I think it's about 20 now out in schools. Yeah. So, you know, there is no charge to that, and we don't charge for the robots. The only time we will start, and if a child needs a mixture of both, as I said, we will accommodate that. And I think part of this as well is to keep the child engaged with the school, with, you know, the hope to go back to school. So I absolutely hear what heads are saying, but, you know, for the schools that have adopted the robot and have them in the classrooms, there is no charge for that. And we've been committed to that.
Over to you, Richard.
Which again, it was echoing the points that are raised already, but particularly around the notional SEN money and the pupil premium money. They are really indicative funding streams that, as Grant mentioned, are already spent and paid for those children. I think there's a stronger argument for the money for that individual child, again, which is already spent. Again, so that's the challenge for schools. But that notional money is notional. It is not really attached to that child. And the pupil premium funding as well is not directly for that child. It's for the school to use as it sees fit. So I'd struggle to see how that could be clawed back when it really has already been spent.
I mean, Richard, in terms of the pupil premium, and we need to go back and check, so I don't want to say too much about that. But my understanding is the indicator for pupil premium is free school meals or ever 6. So, you know, that is then linked to the child, how the school spends it. But if that child was not ever 6 or was not free school mealed or previously looked after, you wouldn't be entitled to that money. So I do think there's a direct correlation between that child and that funding stream. I'm sorry, I absolutely do. I understand the notional 6,000 when you say it's a notional 6,000. However, if the child's in receipt of the plan, that is a 6,000 actual. And I think, you know, we can go back and look at that in terms of with the accountants and have a look how much is really coming through in terms of your notional and work pro rata. But in terms of element 3 as well, some schools have retained the element 3 for the children and they've not been there, and the top up money, and that obviously is it's morally wrong, really. That absolutely is money allocated. So pupil premium is allocated to a child. And you only draw that if that child is, as I said, free school meals ever 6 or looked after. Pupil element 3 is absolutely allocated to the child. And again, you know, on your census data, I mean, if some of these children have been in, and I know some of the children have not been in school for 3 years, and in the 3 years that money has still remained with the schools. So there is something morally here as schools that we need to do. We really can't keep the money for a child that has not been through.
Yeah, and I think there's a stronger argument for element 3 and potentially for the ALPU. I just think some of those other funding areas that you're wishing to take back aren't there. You know, that money.
Well, we're not taking 100% of them, are we? We're taking proportion of them. We're taking 80% pro-rated. So if you had a child, you know, in school most of the year and had to come out for chemotherapy treatment, then, you know, if you want to put the robot in, there'd be no charge. And
I'm going to interrupt. So it's really great conversation. I've got a couple more people that want to say something. My comment is probably what we're going to vote in a moment, but what I'd really like as an action is something around the exit strategy into getting children back into school, because absolutely that planning element, that strategic side, the better we can have that, the easier we as leaders can manage. And I hear what you're saying about pupil premium, but it's based on lag funding. It is not numbers that you necessarily have in your school right now. It is linked to numbers that you had a couple of years ago, and that again we've spent years in the planning on it, and absolutely nobody wants to keep money for 3 years that's linked to a child who is in desperate dire need of it. But I also think, if you're going to Grant's point about prevention and links to the SEND strategy, if it in terms of children who are medically unable to attend a school, not just EBSA, it is this criteria. So actually, if you've got a child that's unable because medical practitioners say they can't do it, that is different from a parent saying they're finding school difficult. Okay. And I think we are in a really difficult position right now that if the money follows and then there is an alternative provision set up, it might be more appealing to be out of school than in school. So it's the understanding of who is eligible. So I'll Paul, I think your hand went up first, and then I'll hand up to Grant.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that. All I was going to do is give some more information on the background of the funding, but I'm not so sure that's particularly helpful in the context of the rest of the conversation. I can do that if there's any wish for that, but I think I didn't want to then take it down or whatever. But if there's any further clarification on that money and the relevance of the notional fund and the pupil premium, then do come back to me, please.
Paul, actually, I was just going to ask that clarity question, because while I agree pupil premium funding is given to us on the basis of children that have had free school meals at some point in the last 6 years, it doesn't then create a personal budget, because pupil premium money doesn't have to be spent on individual children for individual things. It can be used collectively to put in programs in place that support groups of children, or indeed the whole school. And therefore, I think Richard's point is actually really valid, because we don't have to spend the money as a personal budget on a child. We just need to demonstrate that collectively, that children who are disadvantaged are benefiting from that money. And if you read our pupil premium statements, it doesn't read as a list of children with a list of individual projects that we're doing. It reads as, I am investing money into staff CPD, because we know that teaching and learning is the thing that will be best for children who are disadvantaged. So I really do think, actually, before I can vote for this, and I therefore hand over money that is not tied to an individual child, I actually would like clarity about from Paul, please.
Okay, Richard, is that still a hand up? I think it's just, I think the hand sign's gone down. Okay, so we are here being asked to agree the approach. We've just had a request that we have a little bit more information. So I suggest that we push this one to a decision making for next meeting. And then it's going to actually be Jordan that has to produce this paper. Paul's got a double thumbs up on that one.
Thank you, Paul.
Absolutely. And isn't it nice? So Paul saying, yes, please, as many actions for Jordan as possible. On it with Smart. But I do think the what I would like in that is a better understanding of the exit strategy back into mainstream education, and then the clarification of which how we trigger that that need to be educated outside of school, because we don't want to start a ski slope into access of education outside of school if a school is best placed for them to look after. But thank you very much for preparing that paper. So we're going to go to agenda item 6. And we have got quite a few recommendations to approve and to note. Can
I ask a point of order, Chair?
Of course you may.
Thank you. I would like to propose, in light of the fact that we are awaiting an Ofsted report, that we as a forum postpone our vote and discussion on 3.2 until such time that that report has been published, and we as a forum are have that information tabled and available to us so we can make an informed decision.
I think that is something that we should quickly vote on first, and then we can have a discussion. So voting hands, please. So to table the decision for voting until we've received the Ofsted report. 3.2, hands in agreement, please.
Can I just ask, Liz, because I think that's a very good point that Grant makes, but I just want to check that there aren't any implications of the forum not approving 3.2.
Jamie, Paul?
Yeah, I could just add, in terms of considering the budget, no, this is a sort of a standalone separate item, but it obviously generally makes sense to be considered at the same time. But I don't see any objection to making the recommendation that Grant's put in front of you in terms of getting the budget considered.
Thank you. Thank you, Keith. So voting for delaying that decision till we've seen the Ofsted report. 1, 2, 3. Seen some hands. 4, 5. Okay, motion passed. So let's go into the discussion. So Paul, can you talk us through what we are trying to approve and note, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I will keep this brief, hopefully. Obviously last one, so there you go. Yeah, so this is an annual paper bringing to you, as per usual, the proposals from the council on the 25-26 high needs block budget of the schools dedicated schools grant. So as is usual, we produced a range of proposals that are set out in the paper. I'm not going to go through those in detail at the moment. They reflect the work that was previously done in connection with the safety valve and the work that's been done subsequent to that through Dwayne and her team engaging with head teachers and other leaders just to make sure that the areas that are being considered remain the areas that you want to be looked at. So they are set out in the body of the paper. And that's the main part that we're asking you to agree now, as in paragraph 3.1. And in terms of the actual decision-making process for this, that does actually rest with the cabinet member. So it's basically a consultation that we're doing today with the schools forum to feed into the cabinet member before that decision is making. But generally speaking, they've always been in alignment in the past. So that's something to bear in mind as well as this paper is considered. So I'm really just going to quickly run through some of the executive summary elements of it, really. So there's not a lot to go through, really. I think anyone who's been on the forum now for a while will know full well what we're talking about with the High and East Block and the overall difficulties that the financial position is facing this particular part of the budget. And it's not just for Bracknell Forest councils, it's for in general, it's for local authorities across the country. There is some high level information in there about the scale of deficits that are now emerging. So they're currently estimated at around £2 billion. And in the next 2 years, they're expected to increase by 250% to £8 billion. And again, in the context of what government spends in the High and East Block, they allocate £11.3 billion a year to that budget. So it's sort of 2/3 of that annual income is being tied up in debts within the next few years if the current trajectory continues. So obviously that's a significant situation. And ordinarily, when local authorities put together their budgets, which would include the school's budget, they need to have plans in place to repay any potential debts. And what's emerging through this particular process is a number of local authorities are being placed in significant financial jeopardy by having to cover off these debts. So there is actually in place what I think our Director of Finance has called an unusual amendment to the normal statutory regulations in the council. There's an override for the councils for having to cover off this particular debt. DfE are putting it on their balance sheet, so we can carry on ignoring it from that perspective of financing it. But obviously, that's only been put away for another 2 years until March 2026. So that's an issue that needs to be resolved in the very near future. And again, as I say, that's a national issue. And in terms of our context of that £8 billion, at the start of this financial year, we had a cumulative deficit of £26 million, and that again in the context of our annual income, we're getting annual income of about £27 million. So basically, the amount of our debt has accumulated to the level of the amount of income we're getting each year. It's probably quite easy for you to relate to that to your school budget. If you're in that sort of situation, you'd realise, obviously, it'd be very clear to you exactly what that sort of difficulties there are that we're facing. So that's where we are. And what we're in a position now is obviously we've got a new government, and the government have indicated they want to have another look at SEN reform structure, how that's financed. They've mentioned they want to look at how they can tackle the cumulative deficits that local authorities are taking in place. So rather than waiting to continue with our plans to go forward, we need to hold back for a little while to find exactly what those plans are doing. So for this particular year, we're only presenting a 1-year budget proposal for 25-26 rather than a multiple year proposal, and we are expecting to see some clarity on the government plans as part of the 2025 spending review. So that should be out later on in this year. So that's the messages that's coming through from the government about how we can then take that forward. But as I said at the start, we have put in this paper an update and some more information on those particular budget proposals that we're planning to seek your agreement to into next financial year, and they're set out in paragraph 6.19. So I'm not going to go through those in any particular detail, but there may be some questions at the end. But there's nothing significantly new compared to what we were looking at last year when we looked at the budget proposals as well. And just very briefly, just picking up on it, I think that members of the forum are aware that the key issues that are driving up costs are the increasing number of plans and their costs, the over-reliance of external placements that we have in Bracknell Forest Council, which are generally the very high cost placements, and those costs are increasing at a greater rate than income. So we look at 25-26 next year, our income is forecast to go up by 5.8%, which is just about £1.5 million. But we're also expecting an 8.3% increase in the number of education and healthcare plans. So that's another 123. So that's £1.6 million cost at our average rate. So that's more than the increase in the our income, and that's before you add on inflation for next year. And when you add on inflation for the next year, that's another 1.3 million, another 1.2 million pounds. So just looking at covering the demand and the natural cost pressures that are in the system, we've got a 1.3 million pound shortfall compared to the increase in income. So, and obviously we've got an historic debt to manage as well. So there's obviously, as you're all aware, there is a severe financial challenge in the council's accounts on this as well. And if we do roll forward those figures, that we start off with a 26 million pound deficit at the start of the year, we're looking at our current indications that that's going to increase by another 8 million pounds in the year. So we're heading towards around a 34.5 million pound deficit come the end of 25-26. So that's the quick summary. So there's quite a lot of more detailed information in the annexes as well, but the main body of the report sets out the key plans and proposals for next year. So I guess I'll open up if there's any questions. Obviously, Dwayne is here as well to help with any specific service-specific issues as well. So thank you very much.
I know there'll be lots of hands on this. My first comment is obviously some very serious figures to be wrestling with as a country, but also as a local authority. I mean, these are immense numbers. I mean, other local authorities having gone into serious debt, but 123, 8% increase of EHCPs year on year. Just like for the next time when we talk, to know what element that these EHCPs are they for primary, are they for secondary, are they for nursery children, are they for communication and language, are they SMH? If we get those figures as a team, we can then more easily think, is the future provision the right one? I think those sort of elements, and then an overall picture of what we've got in Bracknell. So I'll hand over to colleagues first. So Keith, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Liz. So Paul, given that there is uncertainty about what happens beyond March 2026, my question is, in a nutshell, can you sum up how well you think the safety valve plan is performing to date, given that if we don't meet our targets, no further grant funding would be released? That was the condition of entering into this plan.
Can I say thank you for that question, Keith? Yes, very nice question. Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult one to answer, but what I would say is that I think you'll be aware a lot of these things are easy for me to say, are outside our control. So the growth of plans, we had some expectations around managing that, and we had some strategies in place, and they haven't been quite as successful as we were hoping for. So the rate of increase in plan is higher than we expected to happen. But the two biggest transformations that were implemented at the start of the safety valve have been successfully implemented financially. So the main areas was the reprovision of the excluded pupil service away from College Hall Prue, and also the education, the access to education service, which is again moved away from a very much a one-on-one home-based tuition service to a more structured service, that a more effective service, that some of which Dwayne was mentioning earlier. So those two big programs have generated savings of over £2 million, and they have been achieved. And in terms of where we are on the safety valve program today, we have met all the targets set by the DfE, and we've received all the grant funding that we should have received. So we received, out of the £16 million we're due to receive from the DfE, we've got nearly £10 million of that. So yeah, moving forward, we can't guarantee that we'll hit all those targets, but obviously we're working towards that, and that's our objective. But we're not going to get another review from the DfE for another couple of months on that. And yeah, it will be more challenging, I imagine, going forward than what it's been so far.
Thank you, Paul.
It's okay. Thank you.
Colleagues, any other thoughts or comments? Doesn't look like there are. My only other comment is right provision, right time. So increased use of SRPs. It's one element that we've been trying to pursue. It's nice to see that the 7 SRPs have been working in there. Given the government's focus on, they've announced they'd like to have more SRPs. My question is, are we planning to do that? And then understanding of where we're up to with the new SEMH free school on there.
So I can give you an update. So a couple of things in terms of the SEMH free school. We have yes, we're right on schedule for that. We're open in the temporary provision in September for 10 children. We've identified the children through the phase transfers. The interviews took place yesterday for the head teacher recruitment. So that's absolutely on schedule. It's absolutely on time. And yes, you know, we are working now with the trust who's been awarded the school to make sure that the transitions into the school for September is going ahead. In terms of the resource provision, Sandhurst opened last year. We've identified more children for this year. Edgebarrow is opening this year, and we've identified 5 children for this year. So all that is on task and is all in place. We've now got all the SLAs signed for the resource provisions. And obviously, you know, we increased the funding at the resource provisions as well. In terms of sufficiency of school place planning and whether we do more, Simon Knife from Cammy Tour's team has done a desktop exercise of all sort of vacancies across the borough in terms of schools. And obviously, I'm looking now at the strategy of school place planning and really what our needs are. So I'm currently going out to advert for a post to be able to do that work alongside me in terms of looking at what we have available across the borough and in terms of what we need across the borough in, you know, in respect of our children, young people. So that's all going ahead. That's all fine. We're all on task for that. In terms of Forest View, the ASD school at Bucklers Park, that has been on hold for a while from the DFE's perspective. We are trying to find out from the DFE what's going on, and we continue to write to the DFE to ask for updates. At the moment, we have that everything's been frozen until the government looks at sort of the places across our boroughs. In saying that, I'm looking at a mitigation strategy at the moment in terms of if that school doesn't open, what can we do as a council and what is available as the council. If we go ahead with that school and the DFE sign off that build for that school, then for us to ensure that we can open to take the pressure away from schools, as I said, I'm looking for accommodation and I'm looking for mitigation. So some of you heads here, if you've got capacity in your schools, I will know about it because that piece of work has been done and you might just have me knocking on your doors over the next few months. So I am doing that work in the background. What I will say in terms of, you know, the placements, in terms of where we are, I mean, I've been here 18 months now and we have moved as quick as we can. As I said, you can't build a school overnight, but I am looking at all options, Chair, to make sure that, you know, we get the right places at the right time for our children. And I will continue to do that, you know, over the next few coming years as well. So as I said, you know, everything's on task, ahead of schedule actually in terms of our resource provisions. And again, you know, the SEMH school, that build is on task at the moment and time frame, and the children have been identified. The trust has said that they have potential to take more on the intake in terms of economy scales, and I will again have conversations with the CEO of the trust as their need comes through. But yeah, so all that work is going on behind the scenes.
Thank you. I'm going to hand over to Keith in a moment, but I've got a very nitty-gritty, sorry, Paul, I'm going to bring this question on you. Can we go down to the formula split Bracknell, the national formula split page? It's figure 2. So my question is as we're looking at the graph, so national funding floor factor is 1.9% and ours is 17%. What does that mean? Why is ours 10 times higher than national? What's led to that?
Yeah, there is some commentary on that in the main part of the report, actually. So if I can quickly get to that, it's basically that when the new funding formula was introduced by the DfE sort of 10, 15 years ago. So I'm just trying to find that now. I think it's so this is paragraph 617. The benchmark was set what local authorities, we already knew what we were being spent, an amount per pupil, an amount per population, and then what the new system came in, ran the funding formula through and came up with the figure that you would get if we went straight to that new formula, and that was indicating quite a lower an amount per population than we were currently spending. So one of the big things about funding changes at the DfE, which we're very thankful for in this instance, is they do put in protection measures. They don't move straight away from one system to another. So we've got basically baked into our starting point and our spending envelope a higher level of per population spending than you would normally expect. And a lot of that will be driven by some of the things we talked about before. We have a high proportion of pupils in the higher cost placements and not so many in the cheaper local provisions. So that accounts for some of our reasons. So yeah, that's a really stark difference in the national flow of funds to what we get at Bracknell, and it does just show how much we depend on that funding protection measure and a floor mechanism that stops us losing that protection. So there's always there's no indication that's going to change in any way, but it's always been something in the back of my mind since we've been going through this process. But it's never really been mentioned. It's never been floated up. And to be quite honest, if you take another £4.5 million away, which is what the transfer, the protection is, then obviously that's a huge impact as well. So yeah, it is worth just pointing out. It's really helpful that you seen that there. But yeah, that's the main. Yeah, it's a worry, but I think it's not something to worry about right now based on what's happened recently and the sort of things that the DfE are always talking about in terms of funding turbulence and being reasonable about changing over time.
Thank you.
Okay.
You've been very patient. Thank you.
Did you call me in then? Thank you. Paul, could you also just clarify how this is item 10 in Annex 2, how that is distributed? What is the threshold for receiving top-up for having a disproportionate number of high needs pupils, please?
Yeah, so it's one of those things that you'll probably remember. We bring each year, we bring a paper to the schools forum about the funding allocations we make to schools out of contingency type budgets. So there's a policy that agrees all of these types. So we used to have so like the growth fund. So for schools with increases in pupil numbers, things like that, the support for smaller schools. So we have a funding policy behind all those, and there's a funding policy behind this. So it does come here, but I appreciate it's not always something that gets recognised, and it may even be called something slightly different here. But it looks at those schools that have the highest proportion of children with EHCPs, that's their number on roll. It excludes numbers from SRPs, and it aims to target some additional funding to the 15% most highest proportion schools that look after those pupils, because obviously there's a bigger impact on their costs if they are protecting a higher proportion of the high needs pupils. So it's something that the DfE encourage local authorities to do. And as I say, there's a detailed policy behind that. But I can, if it's helpful, then obviously I can send it out to everyone to have a look at. But it's one of those allocations that we actually run through the numbers. We have all the data. It's publicly available. It's national. It's publicly available numbers, so we can run those calculations and we do the allocations to schools. It's not something you need to bid for. So if whichever schools qualify for that funding will be notified automatically of the amount. And then we do publish all of those allocations once a year to the schools forum to see how that's gone.
Paul, would you please be kind enough just to repeat the real key part of that long sentence there, the actual numbers again? I just want to be absolutely clear what the threshold is, please.
I believe it's now you put me on the spot, Keith. I think I would like to double check that, but I think it's the 15%. So we have to target. It's not something you can apply to every school. That's part of the conditions that the DfE attached to it. It's basically to those with the highest number of pupils, which there can be some correlation to with additional challenges around that. So I believe it's 15%, but let me check and I can confirm that, please. Thank you.
Any other colleagues, any comments? Grant.
Thanks. I just really wanted to comment to say that I think I read this paper with a sense of resignation, in that, you know, we're in a national bind. This is not just Bracknell Forest, is it? And this is, you know, as your paper very succinctly put, was it £3 billion worth of debt across the entire country, and many local authorities in significant financial peril. So this isn't, my comments are not directed at Bracknell Forest, but I again, and Liz normally does this bit, but so I feel like I'm jumping in, is that all of those pounds and pence in that document are real children and real families, and I know that the officers here know that, and we all know that. That, you know, directed at Councillor Bailey and his good graces of putting as much pressure on central government as possible that we actually sort this out. It cannot go on like this. And I just want to say really publicly that, you know, I recognise the need to save money. We can't have a £35 million debt. I get that. But every penny that we're not spending on SEN, every penny that we're expecting schools to pay from their ever decreasing and even more under pressure budget has a real and direct impact on young people and their life chances, and will have an impact in 10, 20, 30 years time on this country. And it angers me massively every time I come to this meeting, because I know we are pawns in the game, aren't we, Liz? And aren't we, Paul and Dwayne? I know we're pawns in a game, which we don't have much control over, but I feel that we have to keep saying it out loud about how this needs to change, and to change quickly. I doubt that Bridget Phillipson is listening, but if she is, Bridget, please do something about it. Paul, when you next speak, Roy, when you next speak to her, could you please pass that on? But, you know, I would just like to say that we are, you know, we're noticing less money coming in through the high needs block. There are fewer EHCPs. The banding tool is definitely seeing less money than we might have expected, and we think is less than we might have got in the old provision maps. That means we're spending more of our budget. That means our universal offer is being degraded to work to support the most complex children. And increasingly, teaching assistants are TAs of SEN. If you're a child without SEN, you're lucky to see a teaching assistant in primary school. So if you're a child that just needs a little bit of extra help but doesn't have an SEN need, good luck to you. Parents are noticing this. Complaints about that are going up. Our ability to offer the universal offer at the standard that we like is being degraded because we don't have the money. It is just storing stuff up for the future. And I know everybody in this room knows that. Dwayne, I know you know it. It's not a criticism of Bracknell Forest Council, but I don't believe if we don't keep saying it, if we don't keep challenging central government, nothing will change, because there are too many other things going on in the world, other spending priorities. And I feel like as a profession, we need to keep saying it loud and proud. And for those that don't know, I'm currently the president of Bracknell Forest NAHT. I will be attending the national conference next month, or in May. I will be speaking about this passionately. I stood for election to the National Send Council of the NAHT because I actually feel passionately about making this case loudly that things need to change and quickly. So I'm going to get off my soapbox now. Yeah, I just think it just needs to be said over and over again until somebody does something.
It's not a soapbox. It's not a soapbox. Keith, you pop your hand up and then we'll go to Paul.
To build on Grant's point, this has got much wider implications for the country. This isn't just about schools. We know that the costs are rising exponentially. It's crippling councils up and down the country. Surely the government and Treasury know that we can't allow this situation to continue. There was a slight tongue-in-cheek this morning when I had a conversation with a member of staff here. I said, "No, this is akin to losing North Sea oil if it continues in this way, and the government have to face into this issue."
Thank you. Paul.
Thank you, Liz. I just thought I'd have a chance to quickly look at that document, Keith, you were asking about earlier about the SEN contingency funding. It is 15%, no more than 15% of schools in primary and 15% in secondary sector can qualify for that funding. Can I just say, just one comment on what you said there, Grant, if I may, please. I think you mentioned that we're spending less money through education and healthcare plans. I think that's what you said, and I'll have to say that that isn't the case, because the numbers are going up and we are spending more money on it. So I just wanted to clarify that. I think that's what you said, but I would just like to make that comment if I could as well, please.
I think the total number is going up, but I think the commentary is it might be less per child. Is the general feeling.
Okay,
No,
yeah,
No,
I think in terms of the shift we've seen is that we are giving more money to mainstream schools when we compared against our nationals and regional partners. So Bracknell Forest schools do have per capita more money from the high needs block for element 3.
Since the January change of the introduction of the new banding tool.
I think we've only plotted 3 children on that banding tool.
Okay.
Yeah, so no children, it's not, when I look at the data, what the data tells me in Bracknell is our mainstream schools in terms of element 3, we fund generously. We are not giving it. And can I just for colleagues here to note, what we have seen is a direct shift, mind. I meet regularly with school leaders, and very often school leaders say to me, we can meet the children without a plan, the needs of the children without a plan. And we have seen a shift from schools applying for education health plans to parents applying directly for them. So there is a shift in the system. And I think 1 month we actually had more parents applying for a needs assessment than we did schools. So just want to put that out there.
Grant, you have a comment, and then I probably.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and just to clarify, it was more that the sense of when the funding has come in from the local authority after the HCP has come in, particularly when the banding tool has been used, it's borne no reflection to section F, because of course the banding tool is based on section B. And that is where I think there is a funding gap. So we have an example, I have more than one example of where it says in section F, supplying a one-to-one teaching assistant throughout the day, and then funding of £5,800, which does mean that schools are finding £17,000 out of their budget, but that they might just be anomalies. And I think the point about more generously funded, I can see that, but of course the banding tool hasn't been in operation completely, has it? And the experience from other local authorities within the Greenwich Learning Trust has connection with the experience of banding tools is a depression of the money going into schools from the high needs block, because it is based around what's in the section B rather than what the actual costs to school are. But it'd be really interesting to see what happens over the coming months. I think just on the other point about parental applications, I have a real theory about this, and it's what I said earlier. I think there are parents who are desperate for their child to get support that schools can't provide because they don't have the funding, they don't have the capacity, and they think the only way that they're going to get additional TA support or access to the services that school run is by asking for an EHCP. And I had conversations with parents where that's their exact strategy. So I think it's that argument, isn't it, that if we don't get it right soon, not Bracknell Forest, but the country, we're just going to get more and more requests in because parents are going to get desperate. They need help. Schools don't have the resources to do it. They're just going to put the request in, hoping that that's what they'll get something out of it. So that's why, back into the day when we talked about early help, where we did have the resources, we did put the support in, so much more could be done by schools. Schools are finding that harder and harder to do. So that's my theory, Dwayne. It'd be interesting to find out, wouldn't it, whether that's the case, because I do find there is desperation from parents about getting support for their child.
I mean, I'd have to prove that methodology, but, at the end of the day, what we do know is, parents want to know their children can come to school and be supported irrespective of what their children's needs are. and that, you know, children should be able to access their local schools in their local community. Parents don't want children travelling outside of the borough for long hours in taxis, you know, and I think is how we greet our children, how we put the support in. Yeah, I mean, I've been in this area for a long time. All my adult career has been practically spent in special needs, you know, and I just want the best for all children, but I also want it to be fair and equitable as well. And, you know, in terms of the banding tool, that was something I took on, that heads in this authority asked me to. They had trialled the banding tool. So it's not as if I've come in and say we're doing it. My commitment was to take the tool that you wanted as head teachers, which had been tried and tested and moderated, and then I would deliver that tool. So I don't want colleagues to think I've come in and just given you a tool. You were already asked me to operate that, and you'd already applied it. So as far as I know, you were aware of what the tool was all about.
I'm going to make one more comment and then hand over to Grant, and then we're going to do our vote. So 31 and 34, send tribunals, investigating resolution of complaints. The money has gone up. I do think that element of reflection of dissatisfaction from parents is something that is an element to measure. Absolutely, people's costs go up, but as colleagues have said, we're a frontline service, and because everything is stretched, there are some very distressed people. And I will say again that it would be good to invest some money in the peacekeepers, because until there is more money in the entire system, we need to make sure that our parents are feeling like they are being heard, because we want all our parents, and if any parents do happen to want to spend an hour watching the schools forum, we want you to choose our schools. We want you to know that we want the best for all our children every single day, but that there are pressures for everybody. That is a direct measure of, it's gone up by 1/3 in both send tribunals and investigating a resolution of complaints, from what I can see. So Grant, over to you, and then we will vote.
Yeah, so thank you, Dwayne, for that. And actually, you're quite right. I know about the banding tool. I, in fact, voted for it. And I think the reasons for it, the principles, I agree with. I do recall Keith in that meeting saying something pertinent, which is the devil is in the detail. And I think my point is that, yes, I agree with the principle of the banding tool. However, it's got to work, and it's got to actually be fit for purpose. And I think the thing that, you know, we need to be doing as a forum and as schools is to reflecting back where we feel there is inconsistency, or things don't reflect, or it doesn't work. So, there is clearly a weighting in the banding tool. It'd be interesting to understand how that weighting works. There is, I think, sometimes a real disconnect in what I've seen so far about what is written in section B, which will be reflected, which is reflecting what which officers, other professionals are writing, and the level of detail, the succinctness, the ability for officers then to decipher that into the banding tool in order to get the right number out. But then what's in section B needs to be reflected in section F. There's no point in saying something in section B, which then leads to one-to-one TA support throughout the day for a child, and then it's saying, yeah, you can have £5,800. For me, those things need to be are potential problems, which I think it would be reasonable for us as schools to point out and say, is that what you really want? Is that the best version of the banding tool and the EHCP? Because I would like this to work, because I agree with the principles, but the operation of it, I feel like there needs to be a review. And there needs to be a point where schools can say, is this working? What's the quality assurance of this system? And is it, more importantly, meeting the needs of children? Because in the end, if I put my best endeavours in to put one-to-one TA support in, and I don't have an extra £17,000 for that one-to-one TA support, other people are not getting their provision, or that child isn't. And that's the point I'm saying, is I feel like we just need to make sure it's working really well. So the work you've done on this, Dwayne, I applaud you. I agree with it. I voted for it. I want it to work, but I feel that that means that schools sometimes have to challenge back and saying, is this working? Is this exactly, is it the quality that you want it to be? Are the EHCPs and the reports that schools are getting and you're getting, are they of the quality, okay, that you need? Anyway, I'll be quiet now.
Thank you very much. So I have got a chance now we're going to be going to the recommendations. I have had a vote in the chat from somebody who's having to leave. So we are moving to the form approves that the 25-26 financial year that the cabinet member sets a net high needs block budget of a deficit of 9.109 million as summarised in table 1 and annex 2. Voting please. Approved, thank you. We have agreed to wait for 3.2 and for us to note that the £34,562,000 cumulative deficit, I didn't mean to giggle there, it's awful, forecast for the DSG adjustment account at 31st of March 2026. At this point, the DFE override and the underwriting council deficits on their DSG accounts ends. Everybody noted? That is a lot of us a very, very serious issue to manage in the future. So Roy, if you can in any way get us an answer, because that's within a year, if we need to do something different, we will need to work on it very quickly. So last, congratulations to Paul. Thank you very much for your service. That's why we wanted to celebrate you at the beginning, because we certainly put you under the pressure today. Thank you very much for your service and all the difference you make to children's lives. Congratulations, well done.
Thank you again. Thank you very much, everyone.
Right, meeting closed. And Jamie, you can turn off the camera and the live stream now, please.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bye now.